Good evening and welcome to the 51st meeting of the fiscal year 2025 of the Milton Planning Board. I would like to now call the meeting to order and begin by introducing the members here this evening and our staff. This evening we do not have Sean Fahey or Jim Davis, so it'll be the three of us here in person. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Cheryl.
Yes, Cheryl Tagaya, Secretary.
Maggie Oldfield, member.
And Meredith Hall serving as chair. And on Zoom tonight, we have our staff. We have Cheyenne.
Marianne Frazier, Assistant Director of Planning.
Great. And Julia?
Julia Getman, Clerk.
Great, thank you. We can begin with the administrative items. Cheryl had sent over one set of minutes, but we're going to defer those until our July 10th meeting, so everyone has a chance to just review those. And then we'll probably have another set as well to approve on July 10th. So, which brings us to the next meeting dates. July 10th is a regular scheduled meeting, and then we will have a following regular scheduled meeting on the 24th of July. So we can keep those dates in mind. And then Cheyenne, any staff update that you might have?
No big updates, just to note, the July 24th meeting is going to be a joint meeting, or a joint public hearing with the tree warden. We're going to have about 2 scenic road applications coming up for that, so that's what we have on the agenda for that day.
Okay, that's great.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
So I've been receiving some emails and comments about when I join via Zoom. And a few months ago, I did reach out to the assistant town administrator, because a lot of times, I'm at work when I join my Zoom, and so I do have my work, I'm on my work computer. So a couple months ago, Nick Connors gave me some information, and then Nick Milano just followed up with it again yesterday. So I just wanted to let people know that that there is not any rule prohibiting the practice of having any particular display name, and that the open meeting law guide on remote participation only lists 2 minimum requirements. And one of the requirements is that a member of a public body who participates remotely and all persons present at the meeting location must be clearly audible to each other. And 2, that all votes taken during a meeting in which a member participates remotely must be by roll call vote. So other than that, there's no any requirements to have any particular name displayed, as well as there's no particular requirements to have your camera on either. So just some information for the public.
Good. All right. Thank you. Yes. So then we can move now then to citizen speak. If there's anyone here in the public, which we don't have anybody tonight, or on Zoom, you can raise your hands and let us know that you would, if there's something you would like to say.
No hands on Zoom.
Okay, great. So then we can now move to item 4 of of our agenda, discussion of the budget and vote. And Cheyenne, if you want to just introduce this with our budget that's remainder and options for us.
Sure. So about a couple weeks ago, Nick and I had a meeting about where the planning board budget stood. And we have it's between 19 and 24,000. We still have to pay one more bill for UTO, and we'll have a final estimate. But we were throwing out some ideas of what that remaining balance could be used for, since the fiscal year does end Monday. So we reached out to a couple people and got quotes, and I'll put that up on the screen. But so far the quote that we have, that's the leading one, is for the economic feasibility study, and that's going to be through MAPC, and that'll fit right into our budget.
Great. So Cheyenne, would we encumber all just the total amount of funds for that project? in case it slightly goes over? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, that would be the full chunk.
Okay. And is that something, we'll obviously vote on it tonight. Does that have to be submitted or sent in, I would think, tomorrow morning?
Yeah, so Nick didn't say specifically when, but we do need to have a vote on it so we can't go forward. So preferably send that in by tomorrow, Monday the latest.
Okay, great. So I think that we would, I know doing an economic feasibility study is something we are required to do to raise our percentage to the 15%, which was in the drafting Article 6 language. Nick also felt like there may be an opportunity to actually increase that even a little bit higher with that study. And we'd have to go back to town meeting and amend that if it does increase above 15%, but that's certainly something I think our board has always said was important that we do. So I would entertain a motion to...
Before we
Yeah.
vote on it, I found the scope of work to be comprehensive, and I think it'll be very helpful, not just for this zoning. I was thinking it could be beneficial for the Milton Village. When we were talking about potential other zoning articles to work on, it made me think it's been 5 years since we passed that, and we've had no applications come in. And so I was wondering whether Cheyenne and Nick could speak to MAPC to see if this study, and this could be added later, if it's necessary to get this out the door tomorrow. But look at Milton Village zoning as well. I mean, it looks like they might be looking at that anyway from reading the scope. But it would be interesting to see if they felt as if there was any economic reason in that zoning that we weren't seeing any applications.
Yeah.
So I kind of was wondering something similar, because this specifically says for 3A, so I was wondering if that could be more than just 3A. You know, we are the board that's responsible for zoning, and as we all know, this the citizens petition, the MBTA article was put forward by the citizens petition, but we are responsible for zoning. So I was wondering if we could expand it, because under the narrative section, it did just talk about a preferred policy option. So I was wondering if that could be elsewhere too. I wasn't thinking specifically down in the village, but
I mean, it could even be East Milton Square, because, you know, we could wait to see whether 5 years and nothing comes in. But while they're doing the work, while they're looking at everything, it makes sense. I don't want to hold this up, but
Right.
if there's,
Yeah.
Right, we can
ask
talk
them to
about that.
think about an amendment, or if it's embedded in here somehow, then it would be, I think, very valuable to us to sort of pull that information out, just as you said, Maggie, not so specific to 3A, because they're looking at the town anyway,
Right.
from what I understand from their data gathering.
yeah.
So
I think that would be a good follow-up. Yeah, I think that would be a very good follow-up question. I think perhaps the reason why they address the 3A is because it's a
necessary.
requirement of 3A to do this. So I think at this time, I agree with both of you, but maybe at this time,
So
the way it reads would be
Yeah, the way
appropriate.
it reads, I would make a motion, but I would like to ask Cheyenne to speak to Nick and see if they can speak to MAPC about even having an amendment to this that could come in our next fiscal year budget, which starts July 1st. While they're doing all this data gathering, it seems like it would be a small add, rather than coming back and doing it separately as a separate contract. So does that agree? You agree with that, Maggie?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, so I'll make a motion to approve the use of the remaining planning board funds up to the $20,000 for the proposed scope of work and cost for a 3A technical assistance for the town of Milton for the economic feasibility analysis per the MAPC proposal.
Great. And encumbering all funds, I think we,
Okay,
for the
encumbering
purpose
all
of
funds, all the remaining fiscal year
all
funds?
fiscal year funds,
Okay.
yeah, is really what we
Okay,
need to vote on.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
aye.
Aye, great. Perfect, thank you. And then anything else, Cheyenne, is there anything else you wanted to add to any of the, any budget conversation? That was primarily.
No, but I'll type up an email and get those, the future amendments out to Nick, so you can look into those.
So
Okay.
while we're on budget items,
Yeah.
we have the next fiscal year starting,
Right.
and we have $50,000. And I think we're going to talk about some potential zoning, but I was recalling, and I was thinking maybe if Cheyenne doesn't have it at her fingertips, that she could get it for us, the codification that we've talked about for some time. There's at least the level of codification to address the comments that the consultant had put forth, and some of it had to do with just bringing it current with state law, correcting some inconsistencies, and I personally think putting tables in so it's easier to use. We've had turnover at the building department and in the planning department, and our zoning bylaw is not, it's not the way many are written, and it's not easy to review. And I think it takes more time from staff, and it takes more time for us and applicants. And we even have seen where there's been mistakes in waivers, et cetera, because the bylaw is just so out of date. So Cheyenne, you don't happen to have the figure. I know Tim had said there's a range for this, and there's consultants who would, the same consultant could do it that did the original or the initial codification. And the other question I have about the codification is, what about the maintenance of it? So now we've passed zoning articles. Is there funding in some other budget to put that into the E-code system? The online system?
I can't tell if those both were for me, but I can, again, write up an email about the figures and the maintenance for that.
Yeah,
And I
because-
actually had a conversation with Sue Galvin today.
Okay, okay,
And
good.
along this line, and Kathleen also, on this, and that it is really important, and we've done the big piece of it by having it now electronic that you can access. But really the part of the conversation was, you know, there's a lot of consultants that write zoning, but really we should have an attorney looking at it. So I think we could put this on as on the agenda on codification, on what our approach is with who we would have to do it. And then you're right, we would want to have a maintenance system because it hasn't really been.
Well, I want to make sure that the articles that just passed are going to be put into the E-system, the E-code system, because the problem we had as you know, for a long time was people would get the PDF version of the zoning bylaw, and then they'd have to go to Sue Galvin to get all the amendments that were made since that was last updated, and that was years.
Right.
And I'd hate for us to have the E-system be in the same place. I'm wondering, we did have a meeting where Sue Galvin participated, and I'm
Might be nice
thinking,
to invite her,
and
yeah.
also Kathleen is the chair of the ZBA, and if the building official wants to come as well, because I really do think there's all of these folks interface with the zoning, not just us, right?
And I think there is a lot of cleanup work that needs to
lot
be
of
done.
cleanup.
So there isn't some type of, the program does not allow for just to input new zoning for it to somehow get absorbed, like our IT department couldn't somehow scan and put it into
We should invite Sue Galvin, I think, to ask her about that process now that it is electronic, how that is.
And if we need to set aside budget for that, it would be good to know now as we plan
That's
for
one of the
this
things
fiscal
that,
year.
yeah, I talked to Nick and Cheyenne about,
Okay.
that we would want to have some funding. And on budget too, one of the things that I had mentioned is there is now in Judy Barrett's office somebody who actually came from the the Massachusetts Historical Commission and has been hired to work in Judy Barrett's planning department. one of the things that I was thinking, because we have the local historic district committee, and I think as the planning board, we could help facilitate this moving forward, is to have somebody with that experience from Mass Historical who would be able to consult with the town to explain it. I think the committee, because this is so new, there's a lot of questions that came out. I know different boards were weighing in, but maybe having some funding, having somebody with the background who could actually help to move that local historic district moving forward to town meeting, and being able to help explain it to town meeting, because it is something very new. Most towns have it. And I think it would be a very good tool for planning and protection of our historic assets. So I think possibly we had talked about doing that. And her name is Jennifer, and I'm just forgetting her last name from Mass Historical, but she just recently... What is it again?
Jordan.
Jordan?
No, Doherty, Doherty.
Jennifer Doherty, yes.
Yes.
Yes, so she's very talented. I mean, I know she's very highly respected, and I don't know what like if it was a minimal, a small amount, it might be worth having just outside help to facilitate this moving towards an article that town meeting would understand and support. And she has experience with all the different towns, so I think that also would be helpful.
Because that committee doesn't have funding, you're saying?
That committee, right. They were a study committee, but...
So you're suggesting that the planning board engage with them, but it would be in support of that committee's work?
It would be the planning department. It would come from the planning department's funding, so I think we don't really have to... I wouldn't want to get really too in the weeds with it, because I think this committee was set up to do that work. But I think that they may need help, and it might make sense. The way sometimes we've funded an MPIC project, for example, or some other things that that money may go towards, and it could be MPIC funding too, because that's part of the work that you all have been doing too. So we can talk. I'm just putting it out there as a possibility.
I think it's a good idea, just from way back when the committee was first started. They came to our Hillside Neighborhood Association meeting, and our neighborhood has a lot of historic houses, and my neighbors are really concerned about it. But all the questions that they were asking a committee member at that time, just like you said, it was so new that the committee member couldn't really answer the questions that the neighborhood association had. And it was a little bit unfortunate, because then the neighborhood sort of, was a little bit turned off from having it, but mostly because we didn't have the questions answered.
And I think
so it might be helpful to have somebody who is more knowledgeable to come and talk to neighborhood associations.
And I don't even know if they have been doing that type of work, because she's new in Judy Barrett's department, but I think that's part of the reason why she was hired, was to look at tools in planning for historic preservation. So
I think it's worth, Cheyenne, having a conversation. Are you jointly having a conversation with her?
About that. I had emailed her yesterday, and she got back to me, and it's just like a little thing. She just had to make a call to the Ethics Commission, because she noted that while she was working at Mass Historical Commission, she was involved with our work with Milton Village District proposal. So before we fully engage with her, she would have to check if she can even do that.
Okay, I didn't know she was involved with our the Milton Village. Okay.
That's what she said.
Okay. Great. So that was just another thought, but we should be thinking about things that we would want to maybe be able to look at.
So one thing I want to mention too is the Master Plan Implementation Committee has a $30,000 allocation, and I asked Nick to include that in the contingent budget, because the committee, as you know, is getting ready to make its report, and in the report we're going to recommend some targeted updates, and so we wanted to have funds available for those targeted updates. So the last time the master plan was done, a committee was established by the planning board. It was chaired by Emily Ennis. Remember Emily from planning board those days? I was on the committee before being a member of the planning board. I think there were like 14 people, so it was a pretty big committee, pretty extensive.
Yeah.
I don't think that we need that large a committee to update it, but I just want to put that out there for something to be thinking about in this coming fiscal year. The final report will go out, in time for the fall town meeting. We're still working on it, so we owe an update to the planning board and to the select board.
Yeah, if you wanted us to put aside a meeting for you all to present.
Probably I'm thinking September, because
And
it's
maybe we
just
do a
been-
joint, I don't know if it would be joint planning board and select board to hear the presentation, or if you rather
Yeah, it might
meet with
be,
both separately, but
we can see if that works, if they would want to do that. So just putting that on the radar screen for this coming year, fiscal year.
great. Good, thank you, Cheyenne, for following up on that. Just giving that information, that would be great to have. So, because those were things on the list that I was thinking of as well. So the next item on our agenda was just to talk about, because we've dedicated so much time to the MBTA zoning, that we now have time to actually look at some of the things that I know that have been on our list, codification being one of them, recodification. But we also, I know the cut and fill, you all have mentioned, there was a landscape and updating to maybe the landscape zoning, and certainly I had also mentioned that I had talked to Tim Zawinski, and he provided me what he had written up in 2015, and I can circulate that to the board members to take a look at that, because he had really gone through and put a thoughtful update to the signage language that he left to go to Boston and nothing ever happened with it. So, but we have it from 2015, and I think it was very good. In looking at it, one of the things that it addresses is billboards. We all know that there was the big petition, and where there was a billboard possibly going to go into at 2 Granite, and I think that was something that there was tremendous opposition to, and this way you don't have to fight it with a petition. It's already in the zoning language. The other thing, we're starting to see a lot of things that had not ever been allowed before, but now because they're not in our zoning, we can't just, it's difficult to defend saying no. Neon signs being one of them, and then also even internally lit signs, such as the Santander, which I know East Milton residents really dislike and find it to be a really offensive and not contributing to the aesthetics of the town. There's also, you're starting to see little neon lights, placards going up on different restaurants, whether it says open or different little things going up. And also the new gas station, the gas station on Bryant Street, they just applied and went for a new electronic digital sign. The way the other one, that was also very controversial. So these are things that other towns have that you can just say no, because there's another way to do lighting. When I go to Santander and other towns, they have cute, the gooseneck lights and a wooden sign, and it can be done differently. And I think that's sort of our goal and sort of the look that we're wanting our town to have. So that would be one, but I would be open to you all, your thoughts too. What you would like to look at.
I think we have to be realistic too about how much we're going to be able to get done.
Yeah.
And with Cheyenne leaving and Tim's position open. But I do think it's worth having a list and kind of thinking
Yeah.
about how it could be done, whether whether board members can do it, or whether we would seek some kind of a ad hoc, committee, like we haven't taken advantage of that in some time, but I know like the first involvement I had in Milton was serving on a committee through the planning board. It was a study committee for Temple Shalom. And so they had looked for volunteers with certain kinds of skill sets. So that's something we could think about as a way to help advance some of the ideas. I did have a couple of things that I wanted to add, and that was, I mentioned during the ADU discussion about how we should look at our setbacks for accessory structures. And then also with MBTA community, thinking about our FAR and our open space that doesn't exist in our single family for sure, but we should look at whether there's any other parts of the zoning bylaw where we would want to add FAR and open space requirements. So those I think are not big lifts. And then another one that had been on my radar screen when thinking about the 40Bs, 2 of the 40Bs where there's historic homes and historic properties, they weren't of a size that meets the condo conversion bylaw, which is 5-acre minimum. So those were like less than 5 acres, and I wonder if it would have been attractive if they could have gone in under the condo conversion. So I think we should look at reducing that minimum lot size from 5 acres down to something less. So I don't think that's a big lift either. I think there's some work that had started on that. I think we had asked Alan Bishop to generate a list of properties that had historic homes on properties that were less than 5 acres. And I think we might have that list or that information somewhere in the planning department or in the GIS department.
Just to clarify, do we have currently any?
We do have a condo conversion bylaw.
Yeah, but on 5 acres?
Or more.
So it's on more, but none by special permit or variance, there's none existing. I'm trying to visually see.
Yeah, I don't recall if
I
it's
know,
special
like,
permit.
I
It
know,
probably
like-
is special permit, because I don't think that's an as of right currently, because we didn't have any as of right multifamily. So I'm sure the current is a special permit, but I think the Burr Estate maybe
Yeah.
may have been.
That has a lot of acreage.
Right,
though.
but if you think about like the 582 Blue Hill Ave,
Yeah.
I forget the name of that
Yeah.
name of that.
McGinley Mansion.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you think about that, that would have been a perfect example if you could have had, if that could have been converted instead of what's happening with the 40B, right? So I just remember thinking, like, we should be thinking about ways, if we're still thinking about MBTA communities, but we're still susceptible to 40Bs. And what are developers going to look for? It kind of depends. What's the best economic opportunity? So,
Yeah, so and I'm not necessarily saying I don't agree with it, but just in my head, I'm a visual person, I was just trying to think, where in town do we already have some that's not Burr? Because I always go to Burr Estate.
I don't know which ones, but I was thinking we could ask Alan to pull that. He's already done it, I think. It's just that it's been a long time, and I honestly would have to see if I have it in my record someplace. And I'm not saying that that's something that we absolutely should do, but it's something I feel we should look at.
Yeah.
Again, kind of giving an alternative to the 40B. That was
Which
the
I don't
thought
want to
about it.
forget, because I did, that was part of my conversation too with Cheyenne and Nick, is the housing production plan is something that we want to fund.
Is that coming from our funding?
So that would come from our funding too, and I don't want to interrupt you and what you're saying. I just wanted to put a placeholder
No,
in it,
that's
and we
good too, yeah.
because we did, I think Cheyenne, you were reaching out to the woman who did the last 2 updates to the housing production plan, and I think she still is doing the work.
Yeah, so she was interested. Nick was talking to her, and then I was talking to some other people because I had sent in like a question to the planner lister, and we'd gotten a couple quotes, which is why we couldn't do it in this budget because they were coming in around like 30,000-40,000 higher, and we only had about 20. So we're looking into the woman who did the past ones and her budget on that.
She was a lot less expensive than that, because I served on that committee.
That's what, and she's already done the work, so
Yeah.
we have, it's really just updating the work that she's already done. So that's why I
think her name was
Interesting.
Karen, I was
Settle.
just, yeah, that's it,
Yeah.
yeah, because I was just looking at
she
the
is still
plan.
doing it and interested, and Katie Conlon had mentioned that we should,
I worked on that committee
Yeah.
with Katie and Melinda Collins, and Karen was very nice to work with,
yeah.
and good, and got the work
Sorry.
done in.
Sorry, what was the name of the person who did that work?
Karen Sonnenborg.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, so we're following up on that as well.
Okay.
And that would be something that obviously is really important, especially if it allows us to be in safe harbor, depending
Right.
on.
Okay.
Okay, so please continue, sorry.
The last thing I had was our rules and regs, and that doesn't require zoning, obviously. So, but remember, like our roadway section, it's a very wide roadway. It requires sidewalks on both sides. If we go back, we had this list of variances. I think I forgot now who put it together. It may have been one of Lauren Massier when she was here, but how many variances, like, or waivers we had granted on things in our permitting. And it's not very up to date with respect to low impact kind of, like whether we use rain gardens or other things. It's not just piped and storage kind of stormwater. We would want to work with the engineering department, you know, on aspects of that, I think. But those components of it, I mean, the rules and regs have been updated a little bit, but those components of it haven't been updated probably for decades, and they really are out of date.
And especially since we've just done the site plan, our new site plan review, approval process, some of those things we did put in, certain
Right.
things that we would be asking for, especially sustainability.
Right, but if, that's under MBTA, but if we had that consistent throughout, like there was, Marina had come to us at one point, or maybe her predecessor, and said that to be compliant with, I think it was EPA or DEP requirements, that there were some things that we needed to do in our rules and regs, and probably in our zoning. And it's just, maybe when Josh was here too, it's just there's been no follow-up, again, with some of the changeover. So that was something else I thought would be important for us to try and put some time into.
Yeah, I think that's great.
And that's it for me.
Yep.
Yep, they all sound good. I mean, basically, I was sort of focused on the FAR. I think that's a really important one, yeah. And the open space, you know, in light of everybody's properties getting smaller and coming off COVID, even though it's been 5 years, we've all learned the importance of open space and distance from each other. So I think that's important. And just having trees, you know, being on the Climate Action Committee, just, you know, the importance of trees and helping reduce the heat island effect. So I think that's...
So Maggie, on the trees, you know, Boston has been revising their requirements in a number of different places, but the places I'm more familiar with on projects. So if a applicant's coming forth with a project, they have to document, as we do, the existing trees, but also the caliper of trees, I think starting at 6 inches and higher, and then total them, and then whatever their replacement is, if there's a difference, if it's less, then there has to be a contribution to trees to another part of the city to make up the difference, so that there's no net loss in tree canopy. So I think if you wanted to look at their policies, I can send you some links, because I've been copied on some of those recently. And one of the other things I think you and I spoke about before, but I forgot to list, was lighting in terms of, and And I don't know if that would be a zoning bylaw or in our rules and regs, but it seems like we continually have to like, each application kind of go through the same thing, like if there's a standard that we want them to use, if a standard pole height we want used, kind of design character that is preferred, particularly like on a a street light, we should update that too. And that's another, probably maybe some DPW input too.
Yeah, so are there departments that can take the lead on some of these things? Not just us starting fresh? Can we ask the DPW or ask engineering to look into what other towns are doing and create, a sample bylaw and then, have it come from the department itself, so then they're invested in it as well?
So one thing that when Denny was on the board and she and I worked with Josh or Tim and I think Marina on, Joe Prondak actually on a bit on cut and fill when she was we were working on the tree one. So it's like a little ad hoc committee. So maybe these, which required DPW, and I'm hoping that we will get fully staffed so that we can get staff support for it too. And maybe we're just going to have to prioritize, but I think it's good to put the list together and see which ones take sort of,
Right.
low-hanging fruit as it's called in the master plan, take those, and those that are going to take more work and more collaboration, they may not get started right away.
Yeah, because if the staff is involved in the department that gets the phone call, then they're well versed in it, and because they've helped create the bylaw, and they see it every day. They can say, oh, this might work, this doesn't work, or I've seen it work better here. So just having some buy-in from the departments could be helpful.
idea.
Well, and having things like if the DPW and the planning department both take ownership of certain things that are in, like stormwater goals, then if questions do come up, it should be easier to answer for the applicants before they get to us,
Yeah.
right? In their pre-meeting.
Right, it just streamlines it, yeah. Well, I think that's a good list. And we can, start to be thinking about that and what grant money will be coming in. I know Nick is, pursuing some things. I think, are we putting any grant requests together for the housing production plan, or is that maybe?
Last time I checked, we had applied for one, but
That's what I thought.
we're just going to do it out of the budget.
Okay, yeah, especially if we can get that cost reduced. That seems like that would be something we have to do soon, and the feasibility study, obviously. So, but this is a good list. So, if there's anything else that people think of, we can.
I'd like to get clarity sooner rather than later on the maintenance and the updates on the E-code and also on the codification. Just it sounds like, that between that and the housing production plan, one of those things, if you're looking at those, could take up most of our budget, which would be, I'd like to make sure that we could get codification. We've been talking about it for many years now. We finally did get the codification, which is great, but it's important to maintain it.
So none of that would come from just not the planning board budget? Shouldn't it come from,
I would hope so, but
from either the building department or the overall general government? I feel like this is general government. Who do we make
Because we
that
also have to do,
request
because the general bylaws also have to be
Right.
done. Not only
yeah,
the
so I
zoning,
think,
but
maybe Sue Galvin and Nick
Yeah.
Milano, but
come to, we should have.
they could be
them.
asked about which budget it should sit in. I agree with you, like just an update to what's been passed, or taking and updating the E-code from articles that we passed shouldn't be a planning board budget item. But we didn't get when we did the codification, some of the funds came from the clerk's office budget. So, so maybe some of this could be split, which would be helpful. But that might have been for the general bylaws, actually.
Well, we'll have that, yeah, I think that's
So
conversation.
would it actually come from the planning board budget or the planning department?
They don't have a large budget, you see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think it shouldn't come from ours, because ours is really intended to do planning.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think at the time that we did the codification before, we offered it to the clerk because we were so interested in getting it done also,
Yeah.
that it wasn't going to happen otherwise.
So one thing I sort of was thinking of, if we're still, in the process of reviewing applications for the town planner position, would we ever expand our search to include possibly an attorney? So we know that, Cheyenne attended law school, and zoning is all legal, just like you had said. Would it be helpful to have somebody
legal background.
with a background in law to help write a lot of this zoning language? So I know that, it's been said that it's been challenging to get someone with planning purposes, planning experience. But, Milton is pretty much built out, as, we've all noticed through this whole MBTA process. Would it be helpful to have an attorney on staff in the planning department to help write all this language? We just talked about how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 possible updates to our zoning. And our budget is limited. And if we had somebody on staff who can write language, what a savings that would be. We wouldn't have to be going out. So I don't know if we could.
It's the legal aspect of it, but the planning aspect of it, right? So if you think about like the kinds of applications we may get under the MBTA communities, it's more on the planning side, like how you're taking the standards that we put in and the submission requirements and all of that. I'd rather have like a design professional really looking at all of that more than, because it would be, an attorney's would be looking at it for, complete, does it meet that?
Yeah.
And we would be looking at it, we would want somebody like looking at it saying, well, the board's, been consistent about thinking about these things as being important, which are a little bit more subjective in some ways. I realize we have to be very objective in the MBTA communities, but we still have special permits that could come in under other parts of the zoning code, where I think it's, one thing I'll say too is the ZBA is entirely attorneys, and Kathleen as the chair is interested in working more with the planning board, right? And so I think taking advantage of their expertise could maybe be something that's available to us now that we didn't have available to us before.
So,
I have a question.
oh, yeah, sorry.
Are we taking comments from people in the audience? Because Kathleen has her hand raised.
Because I'm talking about her, she raises her hand.
Yeah,
think so.
So my only concern, so I agree, maybe our assistant planner could have some architectural backgrounds for design help. So maybe being a little bit more expansive in that description too, because I agree with you that a lot of it does come, a project can look better if it's designed appropriately. And it would get more acceptance in a neighborhood if it fits in architecturally and stylistically wise within each neighborhood. So understand that point. My only question, though, about working with the ZBA is, and again, I don't really have the answer, and maybe I'm off base, but is it appropriate? I sort of view the ZBA as sort of the, they're the judges, sort of, and they make decisions on projects or plans or properties. And is it appropriate for them to sort of be in, or have a say in what is being written legally, and then they're then adjudicating on it later?
Well, let's
So
ask
it's sort of
Kathleen,
like a separation
Since she's raised her hand.
Historically, it's been separate.
Yeah, so it's a separation of powers kind of thing, and maybe, with all that's been going on, I'm a little bit more sensitive to that. So again, maybe that's just a question for down the line, that if the ZBA is going to be making decisions, they're supposed to be viewing each project individually on the merits of that project. And can they view it that way if they have a hand in writing it? So it's like the legislature versus the courts.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the way the ZBA is. I know that's some people's view of the ZBA.
Yeah.
But I would be interested to hear what Kathleen has to say, since she has her hand raised.
Yeah, yes, because I viewed Kathleen coming as an individual and an attorney, but not representing the ZBA. When she came, when we were working on the ADU and the site plan. And
Yeah, and she was very helpful.
very helpful, yes. So, but it wasn't as the,
Yeah.
anyway, let's, Kathleen, welcome. You can, please feel free to comment.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that, tell other people, Meredith does know this, but we were interviewing potential town councils this afternoon. And that was one of the questions that we asked the town potential candidates, was the services that they would provide to the planning board and to the ZBA. And it's sort of a change in philosophy of the use of town council. But one of the firms interestingly said that they prefer to do the drafting of zoning articles themselves. They're not very happy about having a consultant do it and then have to back and fix it up, which was, I said, funny. Because, I mean, consultants would be saying, God, the last thing we want to have is lawyers look at it. And with some justification. So that I do think that going forward is the potential to be sort of looking for more assistance underneath the town council services, not as an extra job, to have the town council be more helpful in drafting zoning, at least taking a look at it earlier than they normally do, than they have in the past. And going to Maggie's point about the fact that the ZBA is a judicial sort of situation, my friend, a friend in Cohasset, as chair of the zoning board, did a recodification of all the zoning bylaws in Cohasset. And he's not a lawyer, but he didn't see any reason why the ZBA couldn't have a word to say, or not, or a lot of words, about how the zoning code looked. And so I don't think that our participation in it is sort of looking to see what zoning might be proposed, and actually coming to you guys and saying, I think we're running into this trouble all the time about this one particular thing, and looking back to you folks to say, is there something you could do about this? We keep getting variance requests for this random thing that should be fixed, and so I think there should be more sort of back and forth between the two boards than there has been in the past.
Great. Thank you. And a couple of the firms also have addressed the recodification and have gone through the entire zoning bylaws and,
Wow, okay.
and cleaned it up. So there are some firms that do have that experience with doing the town's codification.
So while we're speaking, I did think of another one that I had worked on with Brian Furs when he was on the board, which is the pre-existing non-conforming uses. So that would be like our 7-Elevens that, and there's I think a few other businesses in other locations that were business before the zoning was enacted. And we've lost business uses in other parts. When the business use ends, it reverts then to the underlying zoning, which was the single family that was overlaid over everything. And, you know, one thing I think you'll remember from the Ice House days was that people still today say there's not enough amenities on the west side of Milton. And there used to be some, but then they've been lost. Oh, the other one I'll say, I guess, is Franny's Corner, which is, you know, the equipment and gas station, you know.
Which is being converted into a little market, a little,
right. But
I don't know if you would say
so that's just another one of those. So if you think about it, it's the same kind of thing that we have run into where some of these exist by special permit, and then if they want to change things, they have to go to the ZBA, and some of it might be triggered to come to us. And it's, again, one of those things that we said should be cleaned up. It should be easier. If we want to, many people in town think we should be, they want businesses here. They want to be able to stay in Milton for certain things. But we heard from some that it's not easy. And part of it is the permitting. So the pre-existing non-conforming, and Kathleen, that's probably another one where the ZBA should weigh in too, because that one it falls under the ZBA's jurisdiction, probably more than the planning board because of the zoning.
That's true.
Yeah.
So my recollection though with, that's when I sort of started paying attention. I think that was back in like 2014. With the pre-existing non-conforming business uses was, I thought it was a great idea. But I thought, if I remember correctly, it was expanding. So it kind of, I think, stalled a little bit because they were looking at other neighborhoods. So it became a bigger thing to wrestle with instead of just really focusing on the existing businesses as they were. I mean, because that's when that was sort of a problem that I had with part of the conversation that was going on, that it was, I felt that it was more looking for expansion than actually preserving and helping the businesses that were there currently to maybe loosen up some of their restrictions. So I agree, I would support looking at some pre-existing non-conforming businesses.
But I also think about whether we should look at neighborhood business as an allowed use in certain places. And that's going to take some public outreach and some work.
Yeah.
But people have been asking for it, or at least have been interested in it. When it starts to look at how that might work, we'll see. But it's a component of not having to get in your car to go get a quart of milk or something like that. There's the idea that was also, I think, floated at one time is where you can have the idea. I think what that pre-existing non-conforming was, it was to allow mixed use. So it's kind of that idea where you can have housing above and have the business on the ground floor. It's just another way to expand the type of housing that was before ADU and before MBTA. So whether that would still be, the same approach, I guess. But the pre-existing non-conforming and neighborhood business should really be looked at together, because that's what those are. Those are pretty much neighborhood businesses. it's a lot to bite off. So we should
Yeah.
get this list together. Is that something that Cheyenne or Julia can help with, at least getting this list together based on the meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
circulate that to the other members who aren't here. That would be great. Or all of us.
Yeah, we have a list left over from a couple of years ago that
Great.
still on our bulletin board.
Good. Well,
All right,
I
great.
think these have risen to the,
I'm sure some of these are on it.
yeah, I think a lot of these are probably on it.
Oh, and the other one was, what about Airbnbs? Where does that come in to play?
I think we do need to, we should have a bylaw on that. And I don't know what other towns have. That's a good question because there is something in the building code which says that it should not be less than 30 days, rented for less than 30 days. I don't know exactly where that is.
In the zoning code or the building code?
I think it's in I have to double check that. Cheyenne, do you know, because I know that question has recently come up with, in East Milton Square.
Regarding the Airbnbs,
Yes.
I haven't seen it, but I know when I go to our website under zoning code, we do have a little bit under, I think it was just short-term rentals. I think we pulled a PDF way back when we were talking about ADUs, but I don't know if it's specifically in the book.
I think Nick was following up with that because there was some neighbor complaints in East Milton regarding an Airbnb. So Nick might have more information on that, and we should, that actually would be a good one to have. The other one I just thought of also that Tim had been talking about, if you recall, the 5G. Remember when all the 5G technology was going on and having some design standards for those 5G?
Yeah.
And I believe he circulated a sample bylaw on that. So that's something that would be easy, low-hanging fruit. And I didn't want to forget about that. So
when you put when you revise the list, Julia or Cheyenne, based on what we discussed here, like the ones that involve collaboration with other departments, can you like note that? And then the ones that we've identified as being a little low-hanging fruit, kind of note that so we can begin to prioritize them.
and
Yes.
also
Thank you.
sorry, Julia, did you have a question?
She was just responding.
Oh, okay. You were responding. Okay. So the other thing that we were in thinking about this and being realistic is we have an October 27th fall town meeting that's been announced. So Cheyenne, would you be able to get what our deadlines would be if we did want to do any zoning? Because it may be because this recent meeting was so on the 16th that we're getting closer to that deadline for fall town meeting now. So, and we were so focused on getting everything ready for that.
Yeah, I'll get those deadlines.
Yeah, if you could just give us the dates. We have a month, so
Maybe two.
yeah,
We probably have two.
okay.
Because if you think this goes to print, I think at least a month before, so that's the end of September.
We can do a placeholder, can't we?
I think we should, at our next meeting, we should decide which we think we can achieve
Yeah,
in, basically, it would be July, the 2 meetings in July, 2 meetings in August, and 1 in September. 4 to 5 meetings to submit something, right?
And we'd have to hold public hearing on each one.
But like, we held the public hearing for the last ones right before town
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah. And I don't think most of the things on the list would be too controversial, except for maybe Airbnb.
So I would say could we get the condo conversion information that was pulled a couple of years ago? I'm sure if you ask Alan Bishop, he has it somewhere. And recirculate that before our next meeting. So that would be like which properties have there was a year, if a property had a home built before a particular year, and I don't remember which year it was, and it's on less than 5 acres. And I don't know, we may have set a lower limit, and I don't know what lower limit we may have set, but if that doesn't ring a bell to him, let me know and I'll start to see if I can find information.
Yeah, because I do recall.
Does that sound familiar to you?
yeah,
Were you
yeah.
on the board when we did
Yeah,
that then,
I think I
Meredith? Okay. Because if
Did we
could
talk
get
about
that-
4 acre? I think we had different thresholds that we were looking at,
exactly.
like how
And it was
many
the number of
properties.
was it the number of units?
Number of
per-
houses.
Yeah, in town, but.
How many would-
So if you had 5 acres, what were the number of units per 5 acres?
First, we were just identifying how many properties this
Oh,
might
so you
be.
didn't,
Properties,
you didn't even
yeah.
go that
Yeah.
far, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't,
Yeah, and that's why I thought if we have information, we can get a little head start on just reviewing what we have
Yeah.
on that. I do think on FAR and open space, we haven't, we can, I can re-present the information that I did previously to.
That would be
remember that
great.
When I was saying this is what analysis I had done. Of course, it was targeted in the areas that were for MBTA communities, but a lot of that's our residence C and some residence A. So we can,
that would be good to look at that.
yeah, we can use that to start with. And I doubt codification could get done that fast,
Yeah, I don't,
given a consultant would have to get on board or attorney.
yeah, I don't see
So
that happening.
I see that one maybe being for the spring, if we could do it. I would love to have that.
That would be great. Yeah, I think that's going to take at least 6 months to,
Yeah, so, but if we can get a target of spring of 2026 for that.
I would agree.
Do we agree that we should try for FAR, open space, and setbacks for October?
I think so.
Okay.
And signs,
And condo conversion?
because Tim's already done some,
Yeah, the
Signs?
article's ready.
Okay.
I mean, we'll send it.
Signs and 5G, you say we should,
5G was also,
I'm not,
somebody will,
I don't know anything about that one.
it was something that the select board had asked us actually, when Katie Conlon was on it, to look at.
that they were recommending towns pass it.
And then I think something with the landscape business was wasn't consistent with state. And Marion McKettrick had done a memo about that. So, if we want to ask Marion about that, again, if it's already kind of pretty much ready, maybe that's one. Because
Did you-
really, we want.
You gonna put Airbnbs on the October agenda?
We might be having some extra meetings.
Airbnb, it depends how much is
I think
involved
we'd
with
have
it,
to
I
find
guess.
out, yeah, we'd have to research to see, Cheyenne, if you have any time to look at any other towns who have Airbnb
Yeah.
regulations, I should say, yeah. Or bylaws.
And then Cheyenne, could you check the listserv with your other planning colleagues to see if any of them have what they've done about pre-existing non-conforming kind of neighborhood business? If they have any examples we can look at? Or it doesn't have to be pre-existing, just neighborhood business?
Yeah.
I think those would be some good places to start.
Cut and fill, Sean said he would work on with me. I had started working on that with Joe Prondak, and the reason it would involve Joe Prondak is we already have a cut and fill. But I don't know, like if you go out Canton Ave, right before you get to the end where it cuts over to the right, that property on the left that has multiple layers of fencing and so forth, that was a huge amount of fill. And I remember asking him, did that get a permit? And he said no. And I said, how was that? And he said, well, it was a judgment. So you know, cut and fill has become something I think that we think is pretty important. So I don't know if it needs to wait until we have a new building commissioner, but I can talk to Sean and see if he'd be interested. And maybe that's for spring also, since we ticked off a bunch that we could probably get done in the 4 or 5 meetings. I'm not sure that's one.
Because within that is the tree bylaw. It's a very big
We
bylaw.
were linking them before, but
Yeah.
then we ended up going more just with tree with a
Yeah.
little bit of cut and fill, but not a true,
Yeah.
like what I would like to see for cut and fill. And part of it, I think, when that subdivision off of Pleasant, I forget the name of the street now, there's 5 homes there.
Pine Garden.
Yeah. That was going to have so much cut and so many retaining walls, and yet there was nothing in the subdivision rules and regs that gave us anything to say you couldn't do it, or that you needed to do less of it. And that was like, okay, it works on paper to subdivide this property this way, but it required every tree to be removed, a big cut next to the neighbors, both sides. And that's different, well, so it's a little more complicated than just a standalone cut and
Right,
fill,
yeah.
I think.
That's going to take, I think, a little more time.
I think so
but
too, so maybe.
Spring for that.
spring. And I don't know if you remember Franklin, they have something called a development guide book or something like that, where they really have encouraged development that's more sensitive to the existing topography. And, you know, we've looked at a number of things, whether it be the memory care or the daycares, where there's just a building type that the applicant is used to building, and they just plop it on a site instead of designing something that would fit the site. And that's why we end up with so much cut and fill. So if there's any way we can get something in our rules and regs or
It would be
zoning,
good.
I think it would be beneficial.
Yeah. All right, so I think this is a good list. I think this is a good, starting point. We can compare this to the list that Julia has in the office from previous, but I think this is a lot of overlap. I think these are, and these I think I would say are priorities that have come up recently. So great. So I think that's it, unless anybody has anything else. So if not, Cheyenne, did you have anything else that you needed to add or would like to add?
No, that was all great. We'll get working on that tomorrow.
Perfect. Okay, great. So then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, all. Thanks.